Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. Guys, on Instagram, I was sent a link to a YouTube video about Johnny Nelson's opinion on his top 10 greatest British fighters. And he didn't do a top 10, he did a top 8. I saw Spencer Fearon's list and I saw Tunde Ajayi. And I actually thought it was a good podcast. You know, they are having a good debate. Johnny Nelson, listen, firstly, I want to say I got a lot of respect for Johnny Nelson. Great fighter, you know, he was a great cruiserweight champion, you know, held a belt for what, seven years. And he gets a bit overlooked as a fighter. But you know what? Sometimes Johnny Nelson does come out with certain things that I don't agree with. Like, and sometimes you listen, you hear him and you think, wow, man, like this guy is coming from left field. Where's he got that from? Like, he gave his top 8, right? He left out, like, top 10, he left out Amir Khan and David Haye. Like, fair enough, I get that these lists are subjective and they're your opinion. But he said, firstly, he didn't even mention David Haye. He didn't even mention him at all. With Amir Khan, he said, you know what? Amir deserves to be on that top 10 list. Of course he does. But he didn't fight Kell Brook. And with David Haye, he didn't even mention it. And I was like, do you honestly think that David Haye doesn't deserve to be in the top 10 fighters of the last 30 years that have been produced by Britain? He's a two-weight world champion. Listen, I do think David Haye's career as a heavyweight was inflated when you look at it. And I don't think he was as good a heavyweight as maybe he thought, or maybe the public. But he was an unbelievable cruiserweight. Unbelievable. And another thing that Johnny Nelson said, he said, he feels he would have beaten David Haye and he was a better cruiserweight than David Haye. And they were basing the fact, Tunde Ajayi, and they was basing the fact that Johnny Nelson beat Carl Thompson and David Haye lost to Carl Thompson. Since when did triangle theories work in boxing where a guy beat someone, so that means, and he beat him, so that means, oh, that guy's better than... Come on, man. Johnny Nelson also didn't win a world heavyweight title. Oh, man, I couldn't believe some of the things that were coming out. Listen, that Johnny Nelson's a fighter, and he probably thinks he's a great cruiserweight, and he probably feels that he didn't have the marketability. From what he was saying, he didn't have the marketability like David Haye, and didn't have the opportunities like David Haye. But I've seen some of Johnny Nelson's fights. Johnny Nelson was a good fighter, awkward fighter, and you know what? He's a guy that you can say went on to overachieve, right? But when I talk about natural talent, see, when I pick these top 10, this is how I would rank it, right? Achievements, resume, and X factor. How much natural ability, natural talent you had, right? And his reasoning, like the fact that he didn't even mention David Haye, and the fact that Spencer Fearon didn't, and Spencer Fearon is like a very, very knowledgeable guy. He didn't have David Haye in his top 10. And here's the thing. He also had Amir Khan number 10, Spencer Fearon. Then he changed it and put Johnny Nelson and said, well, no, Khan and Johnny Nelson can be joint 10. I was shocked. Firstly, let me tell you, these lists, this isn't a popularity contest. When people put these lists together, it's not about who you like and who you prefer. This is about, look at the resume, look at the achievement, look at the X factor. Johnny Nelson said himself about Khan that his speed was unbelievable. Basically, he's saying himself that the man's got X factor. He's saying himself. Listen, man, I just think sometimes when people put these lists together, he put James DeGale and Frank Bruno ahead of Khan and Haye. Have you seen Amir Khan's resume? Forget about the fights he lost. I'm talking about the fights he won. He beat Barrera. Yes, Barrera was washed up, but Amir was coming off a knockout loss to Prescott. He fought O'Sheen Fagan, then went into a fight with Barrera. There was many thinking that Amir was going to get knocked out against Barrera, and he beat him. He then fought Kotelnik, a guy that beat Marcus Maidana. People forget that Kotelnik beat Maidana. And he washed Kotelnik. He then beat Marcus Maidana, who most people thought would knock Khan out. right? Malignaggi, a 2-weight world champion. A guy that destroyed Kell Brook's second best win in his career. Went to his backyard and destroyed him in Senchenko, right? He beat Devon Alexander, 2-weight world champion, an excellent fighter, and Khan made him look like a novice. He destroyed Zab Judah, right? Zab Judah was an IBF world champion coming off a win against Lucas Matisse. And Matisse was a killer when Zab Judah fought him, right? Oh, man. And not just that, then he fought Louis Collazo, a guy that I thought beat Ricky Hatton. And Amir destroyed Collazo. Beat Chris Algieri. And another win that gets underrated on Khan's career, Julio Diaz. Julio Diaz fought Sean Porter a fight before he fought Amir Khan. He got a draw with Sean Porter, who was Kell Brook's best win. And most people thought he beat Sean Porter. And Amir Khan did look impressive, by the way, in that fight. Right? He didn't look impressive. He got knocked down, but he won the fight clearly. Sean Porter, most people had him losing that fight. And another thing, for me, the two greatest British fighters of all time for me are Lennox Lewis and Joe Calzaghe. I think those two are all-time greats. They're the only ones on that top 10 list. Everyone else, for me, failed against the top pound for pound, the elite of the elite. Amir failed against the elite of the elite. For me, Nigel Benn took losses. Chris Eubank took losses, right? Who else was on that list? Ricky Hatton took losses. And by the way, Khan's resume is better than Ricky Hatton's. This isn't a popularity contest. I'm talking about resumes. I'm talking about who's got the better wins in their career. Believe you me, Khan has better career wins than than Ricky Hatton. And Paulie Malignaggi said this a couple of years ago when he was in the UK, that Amir might not be the most popular guy, might not be the most liked guy, but he's a better fighter than Ricky Hatton. This is what, not me saying that. This is a 2-weight world champion who fought both of them, who lost to both of them. His opinion is a lot more valid than ours, right? He said 4 years ago when he came sitting next to Spencer Fearon, he said that Amir Khan is a better fighter than Ricky Hatton. And Paulie fought both of them. Paulie always used to say the two best fighters I fought were Khan and Cotto. Never ever took Hatton's name. Now, again, these guys in the top 10, like I said, most of these British fighters, apart from Lennox and Calzaghe, who were all-time greats and are number 1 and number 2, have lost. The other one that I think is going to be in that bracket is Tyson Fury. I think Tyson Fury is going to be among the elite of the elite. I think Tyson Fury is going to be an all-time great. I do. I think he's going to fit in that all-time great category, personally. I think Tyson Fury is exceptional. Now, if Joshua wins against Tyson Fury, he might take that spot. But as we speak, even those... Listen, I'll tell you the two names that I think have the most impressive resume, right? In the last 30 years, last 25, 30 years, is Carl Froch and Amir Khan. They have stellar resumes. They've beaten so many. Amir's beaten 11 former world champions. Carl Froch has beaten like 8 or 9. They have unbelievable resumes. And I'm not including Calzaghe and Lennox Lewis, because I've already told you that I think they're all-time greats. They're in a different league. That's why they're 1 and 2. They're on a league of their own. But the rest, Nazim Hamed, Hatton, Eubank, Ben, they don't have listen, they were great fighters. There's no doubt about that. There's great fighters. I'm not taking that away from them. They were great fighters. They had great ability. They had that X factor that I'm talking about. But their resumes aren't as great as you guys think. Go through their resumes on BoxRec. Analyze it. See how many former world champions they fought. See how many they beat. Don't just put someone in there because you think they're popular. Research it. Study it. A lot of people don't know. They just say things because they like people. This isn't a popularity contest. Put people there because on merit. How are you telling me James DeGale has done more than Amir Khan in the last 25, 30 years? Even if that's your opinion, how? He hasn't beaten more former world champions than Khan. He never unified his super middleweight division. How? I don't understand. Like, oh man, it's sometimes when you see people pushing a certain agenda and you think, why are you, like, just be honest. Listen, I'm not a big fan of Carl Froch. I'm not a big fan of Carl Froch, right? I've never been. I thought, he comes across as somebody that's hard to like. But that doesn't mean I'm not gonna give him credit. You have to give him credit. The guy's resume is off the chart. It's one of the best resumes. The fact that people underrate Carl Froch so much and he doesn't get the credit for his resume, I don't get it. I don't get it. His resume is stellar. So is Khan's. Khan and Froch's resume have been out the standout resumes in the last 25. They fought guys, top level guys in their division. The reason why Khan and Froch probably became underrated is because they fought stellar opposition. They fought top opposition back to back to back. In terms of David Haye walks into the top 10 with ease. He was such a naturally gifted fighter. There's no way anyone can, there's no way anyone can argue that David Haye doesn't make the top 10. He just doesn't. Spencer Fearon didn't have him in his top 10. Johnny Nelson didn't have him in his top 10. How? I know, listen, man, there's a lot of great fighters. James DeGale, Johnny Nelson put James DeGale. And by the way, James DeGale is an Olympic gold medalist. And he was an IBF super middleweight champion. He deserves credit and respect. There's no doubt about it. He beat, he had a draw with Jack. He lost to Groves. He beat Lushane Butte. And he had some other wins as well. Don't get it wrong. He avenged the loss against Caleb Turax. He was a good fighter. But for me, if I was to do a top 15, I don't know whether James DeGale would make my top 15. That's not hating on James DeGale. I think James DeGale, listen, when you're picking fighters and you're looking at resume, achievement, X factor, there's a lot of great British fighters. So even if you make the top 20, you're great in the last 30 years. That's great. Imagine how many fighters there's been and you're making the top 10 or top 15, 20 in so many fighters. But Ricky Burns never got a mention. Ricky Burns wouldn't make my top 10, but Ricky Burns hardly got a mention. The guy's a 3-weight world champion. And the fact is, he hardly even got a mention. This isn't a popularity contest. This isn't who you like. When you say why you're putting somebody in there, you need to give, he beat that guy, he beat that guy, he beat that guy. Not because you like somebody. Carl Frampton, 2-weight world champion, a legit fighter, a legit great fighter. Hardly got a mention. Steve Collins, who beat both Eubank and Ben. No mention, hardly a mention. The reason why listen, man, like some of these guys have obviously favorites and they like certain guys more than others. But I just found Johnny Nelson's what he said about David Haye and the fact that he said about Amir Khan that Amir Khan should be in the top 10. Of course he should be. Look at the wins he had. Of course, yeah, put Amir in the top 10. Put Amir in the top 10. But then he didn't even put... And then he said, he didn't fight Kell Brook. Like, he didn't fight Kell Brook. Like, Kell Brook was an all-time great or something. Like, Kell Brook was a good world champion. A guy that underachieved, no doubt. But he only had one significant win in his career, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I just feel like... and he said, I'm not even putting Kell in the top 10, and he's my boy. But Kell doesn't have a resume to be in the top 10. It's not just all about natural talent. It's about a resume. You need to have a resume. Like I said to you, in the last 25, 30 years, I've studied all these fighters, man. There's guys that had more significant wins than Froch and Khan. But when you talk about resume, when you talk about overall the resume, the amount of wins they had, at world level against the top 10 in the division, I'm sorry, but Khan and Froch are very hard to beat. Very hard to beat in British boxing. And this is not me being biased. Like I said, I'm not a big Froch fan. But I have to give the man credit where it's due. Khan and Froch's resumes stand out when you look at all the British fighters. They fought all the best in their division. They weren't fighting these guys in Europe and in Britain and padding up their resumes. They were fighting the best in their division. And that's why they became a little underrated. Because when you fight the best, you look more vulnerable. Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank and Nazim Hamed, they were great fighters. Don't get it mistaken. But a lot of their fights were against European, British, and level fighters, and they padded up their record. And then eventually they did fight some good levels, like Ben beat Gerald McLennan, Aaron Barkley, beat some good fighters. Don't get it twisted. But he didn't fight the pound for pound, you know. Like Gerald McLennan was a great win for Nigel Benn, but Chris Eubank said it himself. Do you think I'm crazy fighting Roy Jones? This is Chris Eubank said that when he was sitting amongst Roy Jones, Steve Collins, and all those guys. If you guys don't remember, they were sitting in that round table. He said, do you think I'm crazy gonna fight Roy Jones? Why would I want to fight someone like that? Because he knew that guy was a killer. Roy Jones was a killer. And listen, when I give my opinion, man, I'm fair. It's not about that I'm a Khan fan, so I'm going to put him up there. Listen, for me, I've already told you, Lennox Lewis and Calzaghe are the two greatest British fighters, deservedly so. They were all-time greats. They were the only two British fighters that right now that I can say in the last 30 years, they're two all-time greats. The rest were all great fighters, but they failed against the top 10 pound for... They failed against the elite of the elite. They failed, which is no shame. There's no shame in losing to the elite of the elite. Nazim Hamed lost to Barrera, right? Ricky Hatton lost to Mayweather Pacquiao. Amir Khan lost to Canelo Crawford, Garcia. There's no shame in that. There's no shame. There's no shame in David Haye losing to Vladimir Klitschko. But David Haye at cruiserweight was a monster. He was a great fighter. And yes, his heavyweight reign was probably a little overrated. He wasn't a natural heavyweight. The fact that he even won a heavyweight title is exceptional. He wasn't a natural heavyweight. He was a cruiserweight. And he won a heavyweight world title. That needs to be respected. And then the natural ability that Haye had. And the fact that, for me, that, like I said, Froch and Khan had, in my opinion, stellar resumes. Stellar resumes, unbelievable resumes for British fighters. British fighters don't have those kind of resumes. They normally have 1 or 2 wins at world level, and then they'll fight a lot of padded guys, Europe, and, you know, in Britain, they'll fight a load of guys in Britain domestically and Europe, and then they'll eventually step up and they get beat at world level. Khan based himself in America. So did Carl Froch. Didn't base himself in America, but he fought all the best names. He fought all the best names. He took losses to Kessler in Kessler's prime and Andre Ward. Why? Because those guys were fighting top competition after top competition, back to back to back. And that's why they have some losses on their record. But listen, for me, Khan and Froch's resumes, taking Calzaghe and Lennox Lewis out, who were all-time greats, stand out more than any of the others. Just being fair, I've looked at all the others' resumes. They stand out. Khan and Froch. Trust me, their resumes stand out. And David Haye was a killer. He was an exceptional fighter. You are not telling me that James DeGale has done more in British boxing than David Haye and Amir Khan. And I think Carl Frampton and Ricky Burns deserve to be ahead of James DeGale. And again, this is not me hating on James DeGale. James DeGale was a very, very good fighter. Olympic gold medalist, an IBF super middleweight champion. He deserves respect. He deserves respect, no doubt about it. But when you're talking about the top 10, and you've got to do it on merit. This isn't like a popularity contest on who you like or who you think's better or who you think's, your favorite. Just do it fairly, man. When people pick these things, and I feel like Amir Khan and David Haye are very hated. Froch is the same. I think all of these three weren't very liked. Amir was probably most hated, probably because of the background that he was from. And David Haye was disliked as well by a lot of the media and the public. Froch wasn't liked that much either. A lot of people thought he was arrogant and he didn't come across. And I thought Froch was very bitter, but in terms of his boxing, in terms of what he did, resume, achievement, X Factor, I'm telling you, Froch and Khan are up there. Resume-wise, their resumes are the best amongst British boxing in the last 25, 30 years. I'm being serious. There might be other guys with more significant wins, like Fury beating Wilder. And, other wins, you can say there was other guys that had more significant wins at world level. maybe had a better win. But I'm talking their resume was more complete. Their resume, they beat a lot of top fighters in around their division, you know? And they deserve a lot of respect, Froch and Khan, because their resume was stellar and they fought a lot of top. Amir Khan fought 16 former world champions, beat 11. That's stellar. David Haye, again, you can see I'm emotional because David Haye and Amir Khan, for me, walk into a top 10 in the last 30 years. They walk in, you know, and that's just my opinion. Now, people may disagree. I just don't think you can, because when I say how you should rank these things is resume, achievements, and X Factor. David Haye and Khan tick all boxes, and they tick it quite comfortably as well. Stellar achievements, unified a division. Haye unified his division, went up to another division and won a world title. Khan unified a division, beat so many former world champions, and was unlucky not to become a welterweight champion, by the way. You know, I think it was all bad mistake of his own, poor decision-making of his own not to become a welterweight world champion. He had a chance, he had a title shot offered to him in 2013 against Devin Alexander, and he turned it down, and Devin Alexander ended up getting beat, and then Khan fought him a year later. Otherwise, Amir would have been a welterweight world champion because he would have beat Alexander a year before or a year after. It didn't matter. He destroyed Alexander when they fought him, when he eventually fought him. But if he had fought him a year before, he would have fought him for the title. And it would have been great because Kell Brook would have been Amir Khan's mandatory. So it would have been good to see what Amir did. But yeah, man, I just think when you're picking these things, when you're picking your top 10 fighters, and I'd love to know your guys' top 10. It needs to be done, man. It needs to be done fairly, not because of you like somebody or you hate somebody. Like I said, I'm not a big Carl Froch fan, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna hold it against him when I'm giving him credit for his career and his resume. It's stellar. It's stellar. He deserves to be on there. You know, when Carl Froch wasn't happy, right, about being in the top 10 when that Sun listed their, listed their top 10, and Carl Froch wasn't on there, I was flabbergasted. I was flabbergasted Khan wasn't on there, because their resumes are unbelievable. When you look at their resumes, it's stellar. Stellar. Their resumes are stellar. It's on another level. So, again, that's my take on it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I just think some of the Johnny Nelson's list, De Gale and Frank Bruno. Don't get me wrong. Again, Frank Bruno was another good fighter. He became a world champion. WBO, I believe, WBO heavyweight world champion. But for me, he doesn't make my top 10. You know, again, good fighter, but did he do as much as Khan did in his career? Did he beat more former world champions? Did he win a silver? Nah, man. I can't. And listen, I don't even like disrespecting Ricky Hatton, because Ricky Hatton was a great fighter. Ricky Hatton did a lot, you know. But I'm just being honest. His resume isn't better than Khan's resume. Listen, I'm going to do a debate with my brother later on tonight, and I will upload the video tomorrow, and we'll go through, we'll have a debate, and let's see what he has to say. But I don't like, here's the thing, I don't really like saying, oh, I'll take him out or take him out, because I respect all of the fighters on that list, and all of those guys did great things. You know, whether it was Spencer Fearon's list, whether it was Tunde Ajayi's list, or whether it was Johnny Nelson's list. Like, but you've got to state the obvious, and like James De Gale and Frank Bruno, for me, don't deserve to be ahead of Khan or Haye. Like, I just can't see how you would put him ahead. Like, again, AJ's career still going on. I'd love to see how he gets on with Fury. I think Fury, for me, will be... that's my opinion again, but we need to see it happen, because if AJ goes on to beat Tyson Fury, he'll be up there with Lennox Lewis and Calzaghe. But if Fury does it, which most people expect him, a lot of people think he'll win against AJ. I think he'll be among the all-time greats, and he may even take #1 spot. Listen, Fury's an exceptional talent. Fury is an exceptional talent, and he would be in my top 10 for sure. He's an exception. I think his resume is a little weak right now. I think he's beat Wilder and Klitschko. Again, he's another guy that's had really 2 significant wins, 2 big wins in his career. But if you look at his resume after that, it's not stellar. But if he beats AJ, He's making a very strong case of him being number one in the future when his career is over, because I believe Tyson Fury is going to beat him all. I do. That's my opinion, and I believe he may even be considered as, you know, he'd have an argument of being the GOAT in terms of British fighters, because I think he's exceptional. I really rate Tyson Fury very, very highly, very, very highly. But I would love to know your guys' opinion. Do you think that Amir Khan and David Haye should be in the top 10 in the last 25, 30 years, going off their resumes, going off their careers, going off what they've done? I believe so. I believe so. And this is not me being biased. This is me giving my honest take. Honest take. Honestly, I have nothing against any fighter. I'm giving you my honest take. You know, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, of course, but I feel like your opinion's got to be backed up with some kind of some evidence, some facts of the fighters they beat or the achievements. I don't think you can. I don't think when you know there's a guy with a better resume and got more achievements, you can put someone ahead just because you think someone's a warrior, and that doesn't. Come on, man. These things are done on resume achievements and X factor. And David Haye and Amir Khan had that in abundance, right? They had that in abundance. You know, that's my opinion. And like I said, I'll do a video later with my brother debating this as well. Let's see what he has to say. But leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know what you think, guys. I'd love to know your opinion. Guys, make sure if you haven't joined my boxing group, join my boxing group. I'd love to know your opinions in my boxing group. But yeah, leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.